Claire, are you very enthusiastic about AI? Are you AI phobic? What are some of your feelings?
Definitely not AI phobic. I think it's an amazing new tool at our fingertips. I do think, however, we shouldn't get overexcited about all the hype about AI, because at the end of the day, even, I was saying to someone earlier, the internet itself is an amazing tool, right? And AI is basically taking all of that information from the internet and using it to generate language content. So it's kind of like a giant corpus, isn't it? Which is just incredible. If you think about, corpuses and what they can give us in terms of analysing different texts, like novels and articles and things, this is like the world's biggest corpus. Right. And we have so many different corpuses focused on different areas now, like business or finance or education. So I think it's very, very exciting, and it's definitely going to have massive implications for the education industry. But I think we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and think that, teachers are going to lose their jobs and this is the end of education as we know it. I think that's a little bit too dramatic. But I'm definitely very excited for the possibilities.
I think I'm similar to you. I think teachers' jobs are fairly safe from it for now. I think when we think about AI, it's useful to also think about the different roles teachers play and how AI might support it or how it may not support it very well. So I think one of the roles we play as teachers is to be the trusted source, if not the fount of all knowledge, but someone who can confirm if something's correct or not. Is something that someone the students look to for information and trust, right? So how do you think AI might change that role?
Well, I think people are going to start using AI in their daily life more and more. And I guess the teacher's role when students are using AI is going to be to actually challenge and question the students about their sources. So, for example, if a student is using AI to write an assignment or maybe to prepare a presentation, then I think it's important that the student shows where they got their information from. Right. So just like you would in an essay or if you're taking stuff from the internet, you would have to show your sources. So I think you would also probably need to show the kinds of prompts that you entered into the AI program and how you got to that stage in your essay or in your presentation.
So here we're talking about the students using it, right? And I guess with the students use AI to research something such as, I don't know, tell me how volcanoes work, and you have to write an essay on volcanoes or whatever. There's even less context than if they Google it, right? Because when you Google, you may see pictures, the website may look trustworthy, and there are some clues, right, to sort of think about if that website or that source is trustworthy or not. But with the AI response, you're just getting some text, so you really don't know. So maybe you then take it to your teacher for assessment. But then how's that changed? Because that's something we already do, right? But are teachers therefore giving less input?
Well, I think it's kind of an extension of media literacy skills, isn't it? So already, as you mentioned, when students are going to a website, the teacher's there to help them decide, is this a trustworthy website? Should I get information from my essay from Wikipedia or some other academic website? And the teacher kind of acts as a gatekeeper to what types of information the students can access, especially for young learners, right? So you wouldn't just let them go wild on the internet. There's always going to be an adult present to guide them as to what websites they can use and what's reliable. So I think with the AI, I think it's just kind of going to be an extension of that, where the teacher is going to tell the students or challenge the students when they use this AI to say, okay, how do you know this is accurate? How can we cross-reference this information? How can we use AI to write a homework assignment or something like this? So we can use it for ideas. We can use it maybe to correct our grammar mistakes, but we can't just necessarily trust every single piece of information that the AI gives us.
Yeah, and also I really like the sort of tell me more prompt, right, that you can do. So I think it's really useful to encourage students to do things like that, where they go a lot deeper into certain areas, because it's very easy to then get more information about a certain topic.
Exactly, and if you think about it, it's not that much different from going on Wikipedia and then clicking on a hyperlink to find out more information about a particular topic, so going into it in more depth, as you said. And for example, ChatGPT highlights certain keywords, doesn't it? And then you can click on those keywords and it will give you more information. So in some ways, AI is amazing, and I think it's going to revolutionize the way we teach. But in some ways, it's also kind of an extension of what we already have with the internet. And then a teacher's role, I think, is to ask those kind of Socratic questions where they're probing students' assumptions about the information that they're gathering and helping students to realize how they can use these tools to their advantage without just blindly copying and pasting something that the AI has given them into their homework books.
Okay, so we think the sort of trusted source of information, that role stays the same, becomes maybe even more important as students have to learn to navigate all this information and sort of pick out the bits that are useful for them and accurate, but also maybe adding more skill development, right? Like this is going to be a key skill we predict for people, is to be able to use AI to engineer prompts. I think prompt engineering it's called, right? So how do we ask the right questions to the AI? But how do I sort of critique what I've been given and make sure that I'm reaching a conclusion that's valid and not just, blindly copying, like you say. So I think that role of shifts where teachers are less about sort of saying, well, here's the historical facts and more about skill development. And that's what I hope happens, because I think that's what humans really should be focusing on in terms of their own development, rather than just sort of regurgitating facts or, as teachers, just feeding the students more facts.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, in a history class, maybe traditionally the teacher would have stood at the front of the classroom and written a list of key dates for a particular historical period on the blackboard. But actually a student can just go away and put a question into ChatGPT and get all of that information. So then the role of the teacher has to change, it has to evolve, because otherwise, sure, an AI tool can actually do what a teacher can do. But I guess there are a lot of things that a teacher can do that AI can't do.
History is a good example, right? Because in history you are taught to critique the sources. Is it a primary source or secondary source? Like how biased might that source be, right? So that's sort of a similar idea. So bringing this back to learning languages or teaching languages, you can use ChatGPT to learn a language. You can ask it to create you study plans, to identify which grammar points you need to study at your level, and so on. Or you can ask it to give you lists of vocabulary, say, give me 10 common nouns to do with transport, and it will give you that. You can then make exercises out of it. So it's a really good self-study tool.
Definitely, I've been studying for HSK Level 5, which is a Chinese exam for, I don't know, like a year or two. And so I asked ChatGPT, can you do a role play with me, but incorporate HSK Level 5 vocabulary into the role play? And then if I want to do some revision, or if I want to get ChatGPT to quiz me on some HSK 5 level vocabulary or grammar, then I can ask it to give me some characters and then maybe test me on the definitions, or maybe it gives me the character and I have to write the pinyin. So you can do all kinds of things, like little dialogues.
But I still find without a teacher or without somebody to check for me, and that may just be a native speaker or a very competent speaker, let's say, I'm maybe not so sure the vocabulary it's giving me is appropriate. I know it's probably correct, the translation is probably correct, but maybe it's too formal, maybe I'm a bit worried. Or do people actually say it like this?
Exactly,
and that goes back to, a lot of course books I found, especially for Chinese, will give you very formal ways of speaking, which is not really what people do. So that's where the teacher comes in. And also, I think the teacher can help train the learner to, again, do this prompt engineering, but if they're more aware of how languages work, so for example, instead of saying, give me 10 transportation words, that's very vague and you'll get bus and metro and whatever. It could be, give me 10 nouns and 3 common verb collocations. Give me some example sentences. You could maybe ask it to not give you translations if you wanted to be more immersed. So if the teacher can train the learner in what are good ways of studying and good ways of accessing this language, it's going to help them use the tool much better.
Exactly, because the teacher might say to the learners, oh, these are some good example sentences, but maybe you wouldn't use them in daily conversation. So the teacher could help the student to write a prompt like, can we make these sentences more colloquial? So can we make them more like daily communication? Can you put these sentences into a dialogue for me? And then they can put it into a more natural sounding dialogue.
Yes. So then maybe a sort of negative point about AI. So in learning anything, we have to practice, right? And any skill we have to practice. Learning any knowledge, we have to remember it and put some effort in. And I think there's a very strong relationship between the amount of effort you put in, active, deliberate practice, and how well you will master that skill or remember that information. And the AI, I think, can lead us to being quite passive and quite low effort and going, oh, make this dialogue for me. And it makes a fancy dialogue. And then you go, oh, that's so lovely. And you read it. But actually, the amount of effort you put into studying that was very minimal. So I think then teachers have a big role to play in making sure motivating people, motivating their learners to keep actually working. Because if we don't work, if we just sort of passively use the tool, we're not actually going to learn anything. So then maybe our role as teachers, again, we will be challenged more to make more engaging, higher order tasks that have more synthesis of different skills and so on.
Exactly.
Where not to say that it's then impossible to use AI, but then to make sure the students actually do need to think of their own ideas, to work with other people, to synthesize, to create.
So you talk about lazy students, but then you could also say that
it's lazy teachers.
Lazy teachers as well. So they just give a very, very simple assignment and say, you know, go away and write 200 words on this topic. Now with AI, someone could just write that question into the AI and get something original back to give to the teacher. So it actually forces the teacher to think really cleverly about what kind of tasks they give to the students where they can't do that, where they can maybe use AI to prepare maybe a short video presentation or something, but they still have to put in the effort to actually deliver that information.
You know, I found that AI really useful for sort of providing a scope of what to learn. So like, okay, I want to study, or let's say I want to learn Chinese or I want to learn English. I'm this level. Can you provide a list of grammar points that I should study or whatever? But you can see, maybe to move on a little bit, I just used the word grammar point there. And we know from studies of language learning and second language acquisition that learning individual points of language is not really how it works. It's more, you know, context is important, combining language points is important. We don't walk around just saying the present perfect over and over.
And obviously when you're fluent, you don't think, oh, I'm using the present perfect right now.
So I think that's a danger for AI, is that it, like a lot of technology, gets misused. And it's maybe then applied by, I don't want to say by people who don't know what they're doing, but applied by people who maybe have a slightly not accurate understanding of how that topic works or that skill works or how the science behind it works. And so you might end up with a situation where AI is, you know, being integrated into a language course just to generate lots of nice dialogues or lots of examples of the present perfect. And we've then repeated the same mistake of trying to learn in that way. Whereas, you know, there could be another world where the AI is being used as a tool to support something a bit more useful.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess with every technology, it's about what the human person at the other end of the technology is actually doing with that technology. So if you take someone who's maybe, you know, an inexperienced teacher, someone who hasn't done like an initial qualification yet in teaching, then actually I guess the teacher trainer's job is to also help the teacher to know how to use AI effectively, to try to get the right information and to create materials that are going to be appropriate for their learners. So creating texts that are actually something that's going to be useful for the learner, something that's going to be meaningful and interesting to the learner as well, and engaging. So the teachers are going to need to still know a lot about their learners. They're still going to need to, you know, analyze the learners, their background, their age group, their level, and they're going to need to get all of that information first before they can go away and like create some nice dialogues, like you said, or some
they
nice
need to
texts.
interpret it. Maybe the AI can probably gather all that information for you, right, and tell you, maybe actually analyze the learner's mistakes a bit more quickly and accurately than we would, and say, 70% of them struggle with this, or 30% of them have this issue, and that you then interpret that information. But I think as teacher trainers and teachers, we have to be even more aware of what our principles are, what are good learning principles, what are good language acquisition principles. Otherwise, I think the danger is the AI tool gets misused to support sort of not very effective practices.
Right, and that goes back to the role of the teacher again. So, I mean, it can definitely help with things like error correction and things, but I think we were talking earlier in another conversation about, say, for example, if a teacher gets a student's assignment and just feeds the whole assignment into the AI tool without even reading it, and then says, here's a list of your mistakes, and gives it back to the learner, then you're losing that human touch of actually interpreting the information, and the teacher hasn't even really read the student's assignment.
And you have to decide as the teacher, what is it the AI is assessing them on? What mistakes are they looking for?
Exactly. Are they only looking for spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes?
Or are they great?
Exactly, You also want to look at the content as well. And this is something you see happening in classes, you know, just general classes. The teacher will comment on the grammar of the student, but they won't actually comment on the content of anything that the student actually said. So that happened in a class that I was observing the other day, where the student said something quite nice, like, on my bucket list, I would like to write a memoir. And the teacher just commented on the phrase they used, the functional language, or whether the grammar was correct, and they didn't actually comment on the content. So that's something I guess teachers still need to do, and the AI can't know the student. The AI can't personally know the student. You can tell the AI that the student is from Hong Kong, that they're a certain age, that they're this level, but they can't have a personal relationship with that student, which the teacher can.
I mean, I think in the future AI will become even more integrated into what other tools we're using, and therefore more specific to your... I mean, I can imagine even in, say, a school might have its own AI assistant, that the AI has all the information from the school, like all the student records and the assignments and the marking criteria and whatever, and therefore is able to give a lot more specific information than, say, ChatGPT, which is this general model. Do you think once something like that happens, and we will get more developments in terms of a chat, so an actual chat GPT, whether it's spoken language,
which is already happening, right? I mean, you can already sync up ChatGPT to voice recognition, and so students can already have a conversation. But imagine in the future, maybe you could have a virtual teacher, like an actual face of an AI teacher at the front of the classroom. And the students would be able to talk to that AI teacher, and the teacher would be able to give a lecture.
I think that's a while away, but I also think humans adapt very quickly, right? And I think once a generation is used to that, or that, you know, it becomes less weird for them than it would be for us. We've got no way.
I don't want a robot teaching my children.
But I mean, 5 years ago, who would think that you could learn anything over Zoom or like Skype?
Right, exactly.
And then everyone was sort of forced to do that, and there was
during
obviously
the
issues with it, and it's maybe not effective in some ways, and people don't like it.
And there was a lot of pushback about online teaching.
But nevertheless, it happened, and people got used to it.
And now it's become kind of a way of life, right? It's something that we integrate into our courses, and it's actually not going to go away. I think some people thought, it's a temporary measure during the pandemic, but now online teaching and learning and distance learning is here to stay, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Are there any other roles? I guess the motivation role is very important for a teacher, right? To motivate people, keep them focused.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we sort of covered that, and I think in that regard, the teacher's job is safer than, say, some others that don't have that human interaction as much.
Exactly, and it is about the relationship. At the moment,
Yeah.
you know, you don't have a relationship with the AI. I mean, that might change in the future. But if I think about my own language learning, so my Chinese studies, I look forward to my one-on-one online lessons with my real teacher because we have a relationship, and she's been teaching me now for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And, you know, she knows a lot about my life. She asks me personal questions. We do a lot of speaking practice. And actually, when I was using ChatGPT to do role plays, I got very bored very quickly, actually, because we were having a kind of generic conversation.
Yes.
And the AI didn't know anything about me, so it didn't ask me any personal questions.
Yes.
So that's something, you know, I really try to emphasize with the teachers on our training courses, that you really need to get to know your learners, because otherwise, what's the point in you all being in the classroom together? Because they could go home and ask, for example, sentences from AI.
Right?
There is an alternative. So actually, that relation building and the motivational aspects that you just talked about are really, really key skills for a teacher to have, those interpersonal skills.
Yes, yeah. And then I guess, just to finish, I mean, there's some roles we play that are maybe not as loved or not as sort of, I mean, they are useful, but they're maybe background roles. For example, like the planner role or the administration side of our jobs, which I think AI can already help us quite significantly.
And things like marking as well.
Marking,
so things
perhaps.
that teachers hate.
Yes.
You know, a teacher doesn't
this
want to mark
idea,
a million
you said, you know, I can
assignments.
feed all the assignments in and it'll mark it for me. I mean, I think that's a good thing, as long as the teacher then still reads it or still sort of understands that student's work and what the student needs to do next.
And how the student is trying to communicate and convey their ideas, right? But then even ChatGPT can also do that, right? So you could ask ChatGPT to give you some feedback on students' work related to the content or the tone of the article or the genre. So if you're asking the students to write, for example, I don't know, a piece of advertising blurb for a magazine, then you could ask ChatGPT, do you think this is an effective advertisement?
Like, can you make this more persuasive?
Yeah, can you make this more persuasive, or can you make this more academic?
It's really good for creating materials, for creating model texts. Like, I used it the other day to create lots of example sentences for vocabulary I was teaching. But then as the teacher, I need to curate them. I need to choose the ones I think are useful.
Right.
I need to maybe edit some of them to, you know, make it better for their level or more appropriate.
And that's where the teacher's role
but it
as
saved me time writing all these sentences myself. And
Exactly, it can save you so much time. So I actually typed in like a prompt the other day where I asked it to write a story about, I think it was about a frog traveling to Paris with a briefcase or something, just as an experiment. And then it gave me the story, and then I think I'd asked it to do it in like... B1 level or something like that. And then what it gave back to me was actually quite simple. So then I had to ask it again, okay, I don't really think this is B1 level. Can you make it a little bit more complex? And then I asked it again, can you make it C1 level? And then suddenly the kinds of collocations and the kinds of language that it was using was actually far more advanced. And it, you know, it was pretty impressive. But you need to have that background knowledge about what the different levels mean and what kind of language relates to which different level. If you don't have that background knowledge, if you're a brand new teacher, then you wouldn't have known to ask ChatGPT to make it more complex. You would have probably just taken that text and said, right, I'll run with that in the lesson. So it's definitely not infallible.
No way. I mean, I hope it continues like that. A final thing also we'd like to mention on this is it's not really a role, but it can also help us to develop our own careers. We talked about how we can use it for... Students can use it to learn. Obviously, teachers need to learn as well, so you can use it for your own professional development, to get ideas. Maybe, I have this problem in my class, and the ChatGPT will spit out some ideas for you, and again, use your judgment to choose one. You can use it to write your CVs, to prepare for interviews, to, you know, whatever. Like it. I think teachers, obviously, we have a lot of things to do around our jobs to further our own careers or to help our school or to help our students. So not just thinking about it as a tool for lessons or for assessment, but as sort of a general helpful tool as well.
wider practices.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so if you have to give a presentation or something, you can use it to soundboard ideas. And as you mentioned earlier, it actually helps with creativity if you have writer's block, and it also helps you to find more creative ways to express yourself.
Absolutely. So I think it will transform teaching. I think the roles we play will continue to be important. There are maybe some newer roles or more importance placed on that skill development side and sort of helping students, children in particular, deal with this world of so much information where some of it's fake and some of it's untrustworthy.
Exactly. So critical thinking skills, digital literacy, media literacy, all these 21st century skills.
So I hope it pushes us more in that direction and not in a sort of replicating the pedagogical sort of mistakes of the past, let's say.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.